So in this very first section, we're going to go through the various settings. Now, I know that this is not the most exciting part of the course. You want to get into actually building out your store and all that exciting good stuff. But as I said, the settings really do form the foundation of every single Shopify store. So understanding them at least at a high level at this stage is super important for building your knowledge on your way to becoming a Shopify expert. So let's kick things off by clicking on the settings down here in the bottom left-hand corner. And first off, we're going to go to General. Now you remember that I said you could change the name of your store at any time, and this is in fact where you would do it. So you can see here the store name that I chose on the way in, so Tim E-commerce Expert. If I wanted to change that, I could do it simply here and then click on Save. Now below this we have two email fields. We've got the store contact email and the customer email. The store contact email is simply the email that Shopify is going to use to contact you. So if you want to change that, now's the time to change it. And the customer email, of course, is when somebody buys something from your site. This is going to be the email that they see in the various email alerts that go out. Scrolling on further down, we have the actual store address. Now, as I said to you before as well, you probably don't have a business set up at this stage, and we will look at setting up a business later on in the course. But right now, you probably don't have it, and I just suggested that you put in your own personal address, and that's absolutely fine. You can change this, as I said, at any time. Okay, so have a good look at that and make sure that you're happy with the store address that's currently in there. Scrolling down further, we have standards and formats. And of course, this is going to depend on where you live. Now, Shopify detects where you are. So I'm in the UK right now as I record this. So my time zone is GMT plus 00, Edinburgh, London, which is absolutely fine. But then you can see that my unit system and my default weight unit are set to imperial and pounds. Now, these are the systems that are going to be used to show products on my site. So if I was advertising something that had some kind of weight, it would be controlled here. And I have imperial and pounds, and that's not actually what I want. In the UK, we tend to use metric and kilograms when we talk about selling stuff online. Down here we have the order ID format. You can see this is optional and we really don't need to worry about this, but if you wanted to change the format of your various order numbers as the order numbers came in, you could do it here, but for the most part you don't need to touch it. And then finally we have the store currency, and again by default, because it recognizes where I am, it's proposing British pounds, which is absolutely fine. Now, having said that, you sometimes need to think carefully about the store currency because you want the currency to reflect where most of your customers are. So, for example, if I was setting up a store that was primarily going to sell in the US, I would want to change the store currency to be United States dollars so that everything on my store was showing in USD. And as you can see here, you can only change the currency before your first sale, or as it says here, after your first sale, the currency is locked in and can't be changed, right? So the other way of saying it. So you want to make that decision early on. But for the most part, and as a general rule, selecting the store currency for your own country is a very good place to start. So before I move on to the next settings, and given that I made a few changes, I will need to save what I have done. Okay, so that's the general settings. I think you can see they're very simple, but they are also very important. So from here, let's go back to the settings themselves. And in the next lecture, let's have a look at locations. Okay, welcome back, and let's go into locations. Now in e-commerce, there are essentially two main models for selling online. The first one is what we call drop shipping, and this is where we never handle the products ourselves. What we do is we take an order on our site and then we order the product from a supplier, could be in another country, and ask that supplier to send that product directly to the customer. So it's a very efficient model. Now the second model is where we own and operate our own warehouse. We have all of our stock sitting in our own warehouse that we manage directly. So we still have our website, but this time when somebody buys something from the site, we turn around, grab that item from our warehouse, package it and send it off. And that's when locations are relevant. So if you have a customer that has a physical location where they're stocking their various items, you'll need to set that up here. And as you can see, you can set up to 4 locations. Plan and permissions. So I haven't yet talked about the different plans that are available with Shopify because now's not really the time. But I do want to let you know that there is, as well as the trial period, 3 different plans, and I will introduce those at the appropriate time on the course, and we'll go to them in detail to see which ones are going to be the best for you. But right now, of course, we are on the trial plan. Okay, so trial monthly, and we are active. And with any plan, we have the associated permissions. So we're on the trial plan right now. So if I scroll down, we have the permissions here. Now, what we've got here is essentially who owns the store and do we want to give access to anybody else? That's really what this is saying. So right now, I'm the store owner, as you can see, Tim Sharp. And then I can add anything up to 2 staff accounts on this current free trial plan. And a staff account is, as you would expect, an account for somebody else, 2 other people in this instance, who could log into the store and also work on it at the same time as me. Scrolling on further down, we have the login services, which is simply an easier way to log into Shopify. So you have the ability via some Google apps to log directly into Shopify without going through the traditional login screen. You will have seen something similar to this probably with Facebook, where sometimes you can log into somebody else's app, somebody else's website using your Facebook password. So that's a kind of similar analogy. But at this stage it is disabled and we really don't need to worry about it. Finally, on this page, we have the store status. So apart from pushing you to work with an expert, which of course is going to be you fairly soon, this is really only relevant if you're paying for your store. Because you have here the ability to pause your store and reduce the monthly payments that you would be making, so it wouldn't be accessible anymore to the public, but you could still work on your store within the back end, within the admin system. Or, of course, you can close your store at any time. And that's important for many people to know that they're not tied into some kind of long-term contract. If they want to stop, they can simply stop. So now let's have a look at payment providers. Now, of course, an online store would be absolutely useless if we didn't have any way of accepting payments. So it comes as no surprise that Shopify has many ways of offering its own payment system, but also integrating with a multitude of others. Now, depending on where you are will depend on whether you have access to what's called here Shopify Payments. And Shopify Payments is their own payment system. And I say depending on where you are because at the moment it's limited to a number of countries. That country list does seem to be growing over time, but right now those countries are as follows, as you're looking at here. Okay, so Australia, Canada, Denmark, Germany, etc., all the way down to the United States. So if you're in any of these countries while you're watching this lecture right now, you're going to be looking at a screen very similar to mine, where Shopify Payments is suggested by default. Now, if that's the case, I suggest you take it because it's probably the easiest of all of the payment providers to set up. But if you're not in those countries and you don't see Shopify Payments, then don't worry because Shopify will detect where you are and then automatically show you the payment providers that are available in your country. Okay, so if you don't see Shopify Payments, what you're probably going to see in 90% of cases is PayPal. And in fact, it's offered to me here as a second alternative. Now, setting up PayPal is in fact pretty straightforward. All you need to do is to go over to paypal.com. Okay, this will look different depending on which country you're in. Set up your own free PayPal account and then just simply head back to Shopify and click on this complete account setup button. Shopify makes it very easy as possible for you to integrate any payment provider because if you think about it, it's in their interest. The more payment providers that are using Shopify, the more likely it is that the more people are using Shopify itself. Now, just before I move further on down this screen, you might also be looking at Stripe as an alternative. Stripe has become a very popular payment system of late, and in fact, Shopify Payments is based on Stripe. But nevertheless, if you see Stripe, once again, it's going to be something that's relatively easy to set up. You just need to head over to stripe.com, create your first account, your free account, much in the same way as you have a free account with PayPal, head back to your Shopify admin system and then complete the account setup in the same way. I'm sorry I can't show you that to you here because Shopify, as I say, is detecting I'm in the UK, so it's offering me Shopify Payments by default. But typically you're either going to see Shopify Payments, PayPal, or Stripe. Okay, you might see 2 of those one of those, or potentially all three of those. But either way, in 95% of cases, you're going to have the option to take at least one of those payment providers. So let me scroll on down a bit further here. So first off, you see Amazon Pay, which is actually a way of letting your customers check out from your store using the details of their Amazon account. So in some cases that might be useful, but it's not going to be a great default payment provider for you. What you're probably better off looking at if you're struggling with the other ones are your third-party payment providers. And if I click on this, choose third-party provider, you see there are tons of third-party payment providers available to you. Now, with each one of these payment providers, Shopify tries to make it as simple as possible. So let's imagine that you wanted to take 2Checkout as your payment provider. Well, if you click into this, Shopify gives you all of the instructions that you'll need to do to get an account with 2Checkout and then reintegrate it back into your Shopify store. So they really do a great job of trying to make this as simple as possible. So let's now go back to the payment providers themselves. Scroll down to where we were. So we've looked at Amazon Pay, we've looked at third-party providers. Now we start to get into the more interesting ones, shall we say, so the alternative payment methods. So if we click on this, choose alternative payment, we get another list, but to be honest with you, most of these would be very much last resort. And the reason why I say that is because so many of these are not really globally available. I'm sure you can already see many here that you wouldn't recognize yourself. But nevertheless, if you did want to set them up, you just need to click into them. And once again, Shopify tries to guide you as easily as possible through the process of integrating it. But as I say, I wouldn't necessarily focus on the alternative payment providers unless you absolutely had to, or maybe there was a very specific reason. So back to the payment providers themselves again. And now we have the manual payment methods. Okay, this is the last of the payment methods. So manual payment methods would include a bank deposit, a money order, or a cash on delivery process. So as you can see, none of those are going to be great for any kind of online store. You know, if you get to the point where they check out and you say, and now could you please deposit your money into my account using this various bank details, it's very unlikely to happen. Same thing with money order and cash on delivery, where in fact is where you buy something and then when it's delivered to the person at their door, they give you the cash. So it's great that they've got all that integrated, but clearly they're not going to be ideal solutions for building a real online business. And then lastly, we have the payment capture. So this is all related to what happens when somebody buys something from our site. Are we going to manually capture the payment, in which case we won't yet authorize the payment completely, or are we going to automatically capture the payment, in which case we're simply going to debit their card or debit their PayPal account, whatever their payment provider solution is, straight away? Now, you might be thinking, well, I would definitely want to automatically capture payments all the time. That's going to make my life an awful lot easier. And in fact, in many cases, that is true. But there are cases where manually capturing the payment makes sense. And let me give you an example. Let's imagine that somebody's bought something from your site, but you actually want to check and make sure each time you do in fact have that in stock. So having captured the payment, you're going to get some sort of notification. You then turn around, go into your warehouse, go and look to see if you can actually find that item. And if you can't, you might not want to process the payment. But if you have it and you're ready to dispatch it, at that point, you might want to process the payment. So I think you can see why in some cases you would want to manually capture the payment. And by default, you can see that that's what Shopify is suggesting. Now, I just want to round out this lecture by showing you this site, which is shopify.com/payment-gateways. And the reason why I want to show it to you is because for every single country in the world, Shopify has listed the payment providers that are available. So I know by default right now you're looking at the one that's available for you in your country. But let's just imagine further on down the line you have a customer in another country and you're wondering what sort of payment providers are available to them. You can come to this site, find that country and see straight away everything that Shopify has to offer for payment providers. So now let's have a look at notifications. And notifications are divided into two main types. We have the customer notification, which are all of the emails that our customers are going to receive. And what you see down here are all of those emails, because Shopify by default gives us a ton of email templates. So we don't really have to do an awful lot. And if you click into any of these, you're going to see the actual details of the email itself. So for example, this is the email that's going to get sent out when there's an order confirmation. So if I click in this, you can see a bunch of what looks like all kinds of weird and exciting writing, but this is in fact the HTML, as it's called, the language that the email is written in is all here. Now, you don't have to worry about any of this, but just to know that if you did need to change it, you could come in here and do that. And just to prove that I'm not completely mad, and I do actually know what I'm talking about with this HTML, if I click on preview here, you're going to actually see the email itself, okay? So now it makes an awful lot more sense. So let's come out of here, go back to notifications, and as I scroll down here, notice the huge array of possible notifications, okay, in order to shipping and also delivery and also our customer. But we get down finally to the second type of notification, which are our staff order notifications. And as you can see, there is in fact only one email that goes out, and that's the email that I'm going to receive on my address. Here I am, Tim Sharp. This is the email address that I'm going to get it on. It's the email that I'm going to receive when somebody buys something from my site, okay? That exciting moment. And I can also, just for completeness, set up desktop notifications. So as long as I'm working on my Shopify admin system, if somebody bought something from my site, I get one of those nice desktop notifications popping up. Now, Shopify is available globally, of course, so it perhaps comes as no surprise that we can have our store in multiple languages. So if we click on Store Languages, you see that we have a default language, a translated languages, and an account language. Now, I've told you I'm in the UK, so we would expect the default language to be in English. This is the language that my store is going to be shown in to my customers. But the account language is something different. That's the language that I could set up my own specific account on Shopify in my own language. So let's imagine I was French. I could set up my account to be in French while leaving the rest of the store for all of my other customers to be shown in English. So it really does have a high degree of flexibility. Now within our store, we can add languages, as you can see from this big button up here. So if I click on Add Language, and let's just take the example of French. So you can see there's many languages here. Let's take French and let's click on Add. And so if we scroll down a bit, you can see that the translated languages section has changed. We've added French, as you would expect. But it's not like the store has instantly been translated into French. In fact, what we need to do is to install a translation app, as you can see here. Now's not the time to get into translation apps, but I will get into it later on in the course so you can appreciate what's involved should you want to show a store in multiple languages. But right now, I just want you to appreciate that you can absolutely achieve that. So this next one, the checkout, is a little bit more involved because this is the whole experience that somebody has when they check out from your store. So in other words, the point where we get to where we put in our personal information, our email, our name, our address that we want the thing to be sent to, and of course the payment details. So if we go into checkout, you'll see that the first thing we have are customer accounts. Now, if you've ever bought anything off of Amazon, for example, you will have been asked to create an account. So you'll have put your information in there, maybe even your payment information, and Amazon will remember that so that when you come back next time, it's all there and you're all ready to go. Now with Shopify, we have the same possibility, and you can see that by default, accounts are disabled. We can make them optional, so there is no account, or we can make them required, so that the first time somebody comes to our site, we can force them to make an account the first time they actually check out and buy something. Next up, we have the customer contact, which gives us the option to collect either the phone number or the email from our customer. Now, we would collect the phone number if we wanted to do SMS notifications later on down the road. Otherwise, we would just simply collect the email address. Next up are the various form options. So you'll have been familiar with this as a customer. So we're going to put in our full name, perhaps the company name, the address, and the shipping address. And you can see here we can either set it to just have the last name, the first and the last name, and make these optional or required as we see fit for our business. Scrolling on down further, we have the order processing. Now this first part here relates to the customer experience while the customer is checking out. And you can see here that it's saying use the shipping address as the billing address. And you will have seen this when you've bought things online. You'll put in your home address and then there'll be a box that says something like use this address also as the billing address, which in many cases is the same so that we don't have to input it again. You can also require a confirmation step, so force an additional confirmation step, and also enable address auto completion. The second part here more relates to what goes on in the back office, and I don't want to get into too much detail here to confuse you at this stage, but just know you have a degree of control over the fulfillment of the order. So when we actually package it up and send it to the customer, we can either do that automatically or we can induce a manual step. All right, but if that doesn't make much sense, don't worry about it too much. We'll get more into it when we talk about orders later on in the course. And just for completeness, as you can see here, once an order has been fulfilled and paid, we also have the option to automatically archive that. But as I say, please don't worry about it if that doesn't make any sense. Okay, the last thing I want you to feel right now, especially in these early stages, is overwhelmed. So if you're at all worried about it, just brush it aside. And in fact, let's just finish on a couple more easier items towards the bottom of this section. So the first one is email marketing. Okay, so hopefully this is pretty straightforward to understand, but we can basically give the option for them to opt in to our email marketing at the checkout. Again, something you will have seen time and time again when you've bought stuff online. And lastly, we can change the checkout language. We can actually change the language of the checkout within our store itself. And if we want to do that, this is where we would do it. So I hope you're starting to see why these settings are so important. Many of these things perhaps you wouldn't have thought about until later on. But what you're doing now is you're building, as I say, this fantastic base of knowledge. So let's move on to gift cards, which you'll be pleased to know is a nice, easy one. Now, gift cards are something that we can offer on our site. They're simply gift cards that somebody can buy and then be emailed to somebody else to come back to our store to get discounts or whatever they might be, just like typical gift cards in the real world, and this is no exception. And so when we set up gift cards, and we'll be looking at that later on, we can set up the expiration of them. And I think it's pretty obvious here, either we can set them up to never expire or we can set them to expire on a certain date. And for Apple users, we also have the opportunity to enable Apple Wallet passes so that people can use those gift cards in our store as well. So a nice easy one this time, the billing. Now this is simply you being charged by Shopify for using their services. Okay, so your bills, your Shopify bills are all going to appear here as they build up. Of course, at the moment, we're in the free trial period, so there are no bills. The payment method, how you're going to pay Shopify, you can add a payment method here. If you have any tax registration in the future, VAT, which is not necessarily relevant in the US but can be relevant in other countries, you need to add all that kind of stuff here. And then finally, an overview of everything you've done in terms of paying Shopify. Now this next one is shipping, and clearly this is a big part of any e-commerce operation because at some point we have to ship our products and we need to set things up in a certain way on the site. So I want to give you here a high-level overview of how this would happen. So you can see here in the beginning, you've got rates at the checkout. Choose where you ship and how much you charge for shipping at the checkout. Okay, so somebody's going to buy your product and then you're going to decide how much you're going to charge in order to ship it to them. Now the way that Shopify structures this is to effectively allow you to create shipping zones. And a shipping zone can be one or more countries. So we could have a shipping zone simply as the US, or we could have a shipping zone being France, Germany, and Italy. You have full flexibility of how you define those shipping zones, and it all happens over here. So we got here general shipping rates. If I click on manage rates, you'll see that already they've created a couple of shipping zones for me. So if I scroll down here a bit, you can see shipping from, this is my default made up address, right, where potentially my business would be based. And then we have shipping to domestic, so the United Kingdom, so that's my first shipping zone. And then my second shipping zone is the rest of the world. Now, as I say, these are set up by default, which therefore by definition means I can change them. And that's very easy to do. So if, for example, I wanted to change the domestic shipping zone to another country, I would just simply come in here, click on edit zone. Now I need to find United Kingdom in this list. The quickest way to do that is just to search. So let's take this off. Okay, let's clear this again. And then let's choose a completely different country. Let's just choose something totally at random. Let's take Uganda, just for the sake of argument, okay? So let's click on Done. And you can see now that the shipping zone has been changed to Uganda. So the same concept would apply for the rest of the world. I can also create, of course, a brand new shipping zone simply by clicking on Create Shipping Zone. All I need to do is name it and then put in one or more countries. So I think you can see that the system is extremely flexible. Now, having defined the shipping zone, we may then want to create the shipping rates within that zone. And if you look here, by default, I've been given a rate name standard with a price of free. But I might want to change that. And in order to do that, of course, I can just click on Edit Rate. And then I could say, okay, my standard rate, rather than being 0, I'm going to make it £5. And then I'm going to add some conditions. So I can add conditions based on both weight or price. So I can say for a weight between £0 and, let's say, £10, this would apply. Okay, I've got this rather strange weight thing in here where it's pounds, but hopefully you understand what I mean. So I've got minimum weight from 0 to 10, let's say. I'm going to charge £5. So if I click here now on Done, you can see this has changed. Now I can add an additional rate. So now I can create a different rate name. So let's call this one Standard 2, for example. And this time I'm going to charge £10, okay? And I'm going to add conditions based once again on the weight. So I'm going to give a minimum of 10 and then let's say no maximum. And now click on Done again. So now you can see we've got two different rates depending on the weight of my products. And I could have done something very similar with the price. So the point here is to show you that I can very easily build different shipping rates within my zones, giving me all the flexibility I need to define my shipping costs precisely. So I'm going to discard these changes that I made for the moment, and then let's just go back to the shipping settings themselves. Now, if that's not enough, you can go one step further with custom shipping rates for products. So the concept here is you have a shipping zone, but you want to have a certain group of products within that zone that command a different shipping rate, okay? And if you click on Create New Profile over here, perhaps that makes it a little bit clearer. You would name your shipping profile, you would drop in a bunch of products, and then you would link it to a particular shipping zone which you yourself would create. Okay, so if you're not too sure about that, don't worry, but I just want to draw your attention to the fact that really you have every single possibility to create any kind of shipping zone and rate that you would like. Moving on down, you can also define the packages that you're going to use to ship your products and also the packaging slips that are going to go into those boxes themselves. So, for example, if I click over here on Edit and then just ignore this for a moment and click on Preview Template, you're going to see the sort of slip that you'd likely drop into your box before it is shipped. Okay, so ship to, bill to, etc., and then the items. So let's come out of that, go back to shipping, and then finally at the bottom here we have a very powerful feature which is accounts and integrations. And this is going to basically enable you to integrate your Shopify store with existing fulfillment services. So let's say you're shipping via FedEx, for example, or DHL. Using the features that are available in this system, you will be able to integrate your store directly with those companies. So this next one really is super easy, and it's the files. Okay, so this is where you're going to find all of your files. So it could be images, videos, PDFs, anything. It's all going to be stored here in your own storage system within your Shopify store. And as we create various things as we go through the course, you're going to see this building up. But suffice it to say, if you wanted to upload anything manually, all you would do is click on this Upload Files button, which is going to open up a little dialog box. You could find a file, an image, or whatever it is on your PC and upload it here to your Shopify store. Okay, we're getting there. So let's have a look at legal. So every store, every e-commerce store at least, has to have some legal pages, some pages by law. And those are the refund policy, the privacy policy, and the terms of service. And we can also add in, if we like, a shipping policy. Now, if I scroll back up to the top, Shopify makes this nice and easy for us because they've created templates which we can use. And in order to get, for example, the template for the refund policy, all we need to do is click on Create from Template. And it creates us an instant refund policy, okay? And in here, you're going to see some things that relate to our store. So, for example, they've dropped in my email address here, okay? Just there. Now, these policies, and it's the same for the others, are pretty generic, okay? So they might not be specific to a particular store if it was doing something particularly special, but generally speaking, this is an excellent start and is going to cover 95% of the e-commerce stores that are out there. And now it's time for everyone's favourite, of course, it's taxes. Now, generally this relates to sales taxes within certain countries, and this can get complicated, which is why it says here, check with a tax expert to understand your tax obligations. But just to get you started, you can see here that the tax regions reflect exactly the shipping zones that we set up. So we had United Kingdom and the rest of the world. So for example, in the United Kingdom, the VAT rate is 20%. So if I were to click on here, edit, you can see here we've got a base tax of 20%. Now, for all of the other countries in the world, and depending on where you're selling, you may not need to even worry about this, or you might only have to worry about it once you get up to a certain limit, or you may need to worry about it from day one. It really just depends, which is why I repeat myself, is you need to speak to a tax expert if you're at all concerned about what your tax obligations are. Now, in terms of the tax calculations that will be shown on the store itself, we have various options down here. So we can show all prices with taxes included. So sometimes with other countries, for example in the US, often when you buy something, you'll buy it. That will be the price advertised in the store. And then when you get to the actual checkout, they'll add the sales tax on later. Okay, so it kind of depends where you are. In the UK, we tend to integrate the whole thing. So show all prices with tax included would be suitable for UK. But we might want to check that off for the US, for example. Then we can charge tax on the shipping rates as well, and we can also choose to charge VAT on digital goods. So if you were selling items digitally on your store, like for example an online course, then you can choose also to charge VAT on that. So in fact, the way that this is set up in Shopify is relatively straightforward to put in those numbers and associate it all with the correct shipping zones. But as I say, that's kind of the easy bit. To really understand what this is all about, you would need to employ the services of a proper tax expert. And then finally, the very last setting we need to look at are the sales channels. Now, I talked a little bit about this in the introductory lectures, but the concept of a sales channel, of course, is an outlet for your products. Okay, effectively, it's just a way of reaching your customers. And the online store is shown by default. So if you think about it, an online store, your website, if you like, is one way of reaching your customers. But there are many others, and Shopify gives us the opportunity to add them in so we can effectively push our products to additional sales channels, additional forms of reaching potential customers. And to see those, all you need to do is just to click on Add Sales Channels. And you can see here, much like we saw before, you have the point of sale, which is basically where somebody buys something physically from you at a point of sale in a shop. We could push it onto a Facebook shop. We could go to Instagram. We could go to eBay, etc. Okay, so there's a whole bunch down here that we could use that could potentially be a very interesting way of pushing more sales towards our business. Now you can see here that Amazon is unavailable, and if you click on this, you can't add this channel. You'll see it's because Amazon requires a certain store currency. Now, I just want to draw your attention towards Amazon because obviously that's the biggest online marketplace in the world and the one that you might want to be involved with. So you do have that option, but you would need to change your store currency, and you know how to do that now because we went through it on one of the settings. You know how to change your store currency. So you might want to, if you had a customer or you yourself were interested in potentially selling also on Amazon as well as your own online store, you might want to set your store currency to USD or CAD, which is Canadian dollars. But otherwise, let's come out of this and celebrate the fact that we have reached the end of all of these settings. Now, I hope you can see, this is what I said in the beginning, that these are the building blocks. Yeah, all of these things that we've been through now have given you, I hope, a massive amount of knowledge very, very quickly. I mean, we really haven't been going very long here now. But what you have, you're going to see this as we go through the rest of the course, because the next thing we're going to be doing is actually building out the store itself. And we're going to be dipping back into these settings now and again. But when we do, you'll be familiar with them and you'll understand why it is that we went through this process to understand them right now at this level of detail.